What started as a simple visit to see her husband stationed at a remote military outpost in Afghanistan turned into the most terrifying and heroic day of Sarah Mitchell's life. A kindergarten teacher from Ohio with no military training. Sarah had only fired a rifle twice in her life during hunting trips with her father. She came bearing homemade cookies and letters from home, planning to spend a quiet week with Captain James Mitchell before returning to her classroom. But when insurgents launched a coordinated attack on Forward Operating Base Phoenix at dawn, Sarah found herself holding a sniper rifle with trembling hands, knowing that the lives of 47 soldiers, including her husband, depended on shots she had never trained to take. This is the true story of how an ordinary woman became an extraordinary hero when love met warfare on one of the deadliest days in the base's history. Sarah Mitchell pressed her face against the small window of the military transport helicopter, watching the rugged landscape of Afghanistan stretch endlessly below. The mountainous terrain looked nothing like the rolling hills of Ohio she was used to. After 18 months of separation, she was finally going to see her husband James again. The familiar weight of worry that had settled in her chest since his deployment felt lighter with each mile that brought her closer to Forward Operating Base Phoenix. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and diesel fumes. Sarah clutched her duffel bag tightly, filled with homemade chocolate chip cookies, letters from their families, and photos of their golden retriever Max. She had spent weeks planning this visit, coordinating with military officials to get approval for the rare civilian visit to the remote outpost. Captain James Mitchell was waiting for her at the landing pad, his face breaking into the first genuine smile she had seen from him during their video calls. The base looked smaller than she had imagined from his descriptions, surrounded by high concrete walls and guard towers that seemed to watch over the harsh landscape like stone sentinels. "I can't believe you're actually here," James whispered as he held her close, his voice muffled by the noise of the helicopter preparing for departure. The sound of the rotors fading into the distance left behind an almost eerie quiet that Sarah found unsettling. Base Phoenix housed 47 soldiers, most of them young men barely out of their teens, who looked at Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and homesickness. She reminded them of sisters, girlfriends, and mothers they had left behind. The commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, welcomed her warmly, but made it clear that her visit came with strict security protocols. "Ma'am, I need to be direct with you," Colonel Martinez explained as they walked through the base. "This area has seen increased insurgent activity in recent weeks. We've had reports of enemy movement in the surrounding hills. While we're honored to have you here, I need you to understand the risks." Sarah nodded, though the reality of the danger felt abstract. The base seemed secure with its walls and armed guards. She had read the news reports about attacks on military installations, but sitting in her classroom in Cincinnati, those events had felt distant and unreal. That evening, James gave her a tour of the base. The living quarters were cramped but functional. The mess hall buzzed with conversation as soldiers gathered for dinner, their spirits lifted by the presence of someone from home. Sarah found herself answering questions about life back in the States, sharing stories about her students, and listening to the soldiers talk about their families. Sergeant Kevin Torres, barely 22 years old, showed her pictures of his newborn daughter he had never met. Private Lisa Chen talked about her plans to study engineering after her service ended. These weren't just soldiers to Sarah anymore. They were young people with dreams and fears, far from everything familiar. "Your husband is lucky to have you," Sergeant Torres told her as they sat around a makeshift campfire after dinner. "It means everything to us when family visits. Reminds us what we're fighting for." James had prepared a small room for them in the officers' quarters. As they lay on the narrow cot that night, Sarah listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the base settling into evening routines. Guard dogs barked occasionally, and she could hear the distant murmur of radio communications from the command post. "Are you scared out here?" she asked James in the darkness. He was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," he admitted. "But having you here, even for just a week, makes me remember why I signed up for this. To protect people like you, like our future kids, like the students you teach." Sarah had never fully understood the weight her husband carried until that moment. She thought about her fifth-grade class back home, how they had made a banner for Captain Mitchell before she left. Those children were safe in their classroom because people like James stood guard in places like this. The next morning brought the routine of military life. Sarah watched the soldiers go through their drills, their movements precise and practiced. She helped in the mess hall, peeling potatoes and sharing stories that made the young soldiers laugh. For a few hours, the base felt almost normal, like a summer camp for adults. But the normalcy was deceptive. Throughout the day, radio chatter increased. Colonel Martinez held hushed conversations with his senior staff. James became more tense as reports came in from reconnaissance patrols. The enemy movement in the surrounding hills was not random. It was organized and deliberate. "Sarah." James found her in the mess hall that afternoon. "I need to talk to you." His serious tone made her stomach tighten with worry. They walked to a quiet corner of the base where they could speak privately. "Intelligence suggests we might face an attack soon," he said carefully. "The colonel wants to evacuate you tomorrow morning." Sarah felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. She had only been there 2 days of her planned week-long visit, but the increasing tension on the base was unmistakable. Is it really that serious? We've been monitoring radio communications from insurgent groups. They know about your visit. Having a civilian here makes the base a higher priority target for them. It's not just about military tactics anymore. It's about propaganda. The reality hit her like a physical blow. Her presence, meant to bring comfort to her husband and his fellow soldiers, had actually put them all in greater danger. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. "I should leave tonight," she said quickly. "The helicopter can't fly safely at night in this terrain. First light tomorrow is the earliest." James took her hands. "I need you to promise me something. If anything happens tonight, you stay in the bunker. Don't try to help. Don't try to find me. Just stay safe." That evening, the mood on the base was subdued. The soldiers went about their duties with extra vigilance. Guard rotations were doubled, and weapons were checked and rechecked. Sarah felt the eyes of every soldier on her, knowing that her presence had changed the stakes of their mission. She spent the evening writing letters to her students, not knowing if she would be able to deliver them in person. The simple act of describing her experiences at the base helped calm her nerves, but she could not shake the feeling that something was building in the darkness beyond the walls. Around midnight, she was awakened by increased radio activity. James was already up, putting on his gear with practiced efficiency. "Just a precaution," he assured her, but his eyes told a different story. "The perimeter sensors are picking up movement," he explained quietly. "Could be nothing, could be animals, but we're not taking chances." Sarah lay awake listening to the sounds of the base, preparing for possible conflict. Footsteps moved quickly across the compound, voices spoke in urgent whispers, and the mechanical sounds of weapons being prepared created a symphony of readiness that she had never experienced before. As the hours passed, the tension became almost unbearable. Sarah found herself praying for the first time in years, asking for the safety of these brave young people who had welcomed her so warmly. She thought about their families back home, probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that their sons and daughters might be facing danger at this very moment. Just before dawn, as the first hint of light began to creep over the mountains, the radio in James's room crackled to life with an urgent message that made her blood run cold. "Base Phoenix, we have confirmed enemy movement. Multiple contacts approaching from the north and east. Estimate 20 to 30 hostiles. This is not a drill." Sarah's peaceful visit had become something else entirely. In a few hours, she would discover that sometimes ordinary people are called upon to do extraordinary things, and that love can give someone the strength to face their greatest fears. The first explosion shattered the pre-dawn quiet like thunder splitting the sky. Sarah was thrown from the narrow cot as the building shook, her ears ringing from the blast. James was already moving, grabbing his rifle and tactical vest with the automatic precision of countless drills. "Mortar fire!" someone shouted outside. "Take cover!" James pulled Sarah to her feet, his face grim in the emergency lighting that had automatically activated. "The bunker! Now!" He grabbed her hand and led her out of their quarters into chaos. The base had transformed in seconds from a place of routine to a battlefield. Soldiers ran across the compound, taking defensive positions they had practiced but hoped never to use. The steady crack of rifle fire began to echo from the perimeter walls, punctuated by the deeper boom of mortars landing nearby. The bunker was a reinforced concrete structure built into the ground near the center of the base. Colonel Martinez was already there, coordinating the defense over multiple radio channels. His calm voice stood in stark contrast to the violence erupting around them. "All units report in. Guard towers 1 and 3, what's your status?" The responses painted a grim picture. The insurgents had planned their attack carefully, hitting the base from multiple directions at once. The northern perimeter was under heavy fire, and the eastern wall had taken a direct hit from a rocket-propelled grenade. "Sarah, stay here," James commanded, his hands on her shoulders. "No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay in this bunker until the all-clear is given." She nodded, though every instinct told her she wanted to help somehow. Watching the man she loved prepare to face mortal danger while she remained safe felt wrong, but she understood she would only be a liability in combat. James kissed her quickly and rushed out into the firefight. Through the reinforced windows of the bunker, Sarah could see muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. The sound was overwhelming, a constant symphony of gunfire, explosions, and shouted orders. Colonel Martinez worked the radios frantically, trying to coordinate a defense against an enemy that seemed to know exactly where to strike. Tower 2 respond. Tower 2, do you copy? Only static answered. Sarah watched the colonel's face tighten as he realized they had lost one of their key defensive positions.
This is Bravo team. Dead.
We're taking heavy fire from the North Ridge. Request immediate support. Alpha team is pinned down near the motor pool. We've got wounded at the eastern wall. Each radio transmission brought worse news. The insurgents had overwhelming numbers and superior positioning on the surrounding hills. Worse, they seemed to know the base layout intimately, striking at exactly the right points to cause maximum damage and confusion. Sergeant Torres stumbled into the bunker, blood streaming from a head wound. Colonel, Tower 2 is gone. Rodriguez and Thompson didn't make it out. Sarah's heart lurched. She had shared dinner with Rodriguez just 2 nights ago. He had shown her pictures of his sister's wedding, excited that he would be home for her next birthday. How many are we facing out there? Colonel Martinez demanded. At least 30, maybe more. They've got us surrounded on 3 sides. Professional fighters, not the usual insurgent rabble. Someone trained these guys. The battle raged for over an hour. Through the small windows, Sarah watched soldiers she had come to know and care about risking their lives to defend the base. She saw Private Chen running medical supplies to the wounded under heavy fire. Sergeant Torres returned to the fight despite his injury, his determination unwavering. Then the radio crackled with James's voice, strained and urgent. Command, this is Captain Mitchell. I'm in Tower 4 with Private Davis. We can see the main insurgent position on the North Ridge, but our angle is wrong. We need elevation and a clear line of sight to take out their heavy weapons. Colonel Martinez studied the tactical map spread across the bunker table. There's nowhere else, Captain. Tower 4 is our highest vantage point. Negative, sir. There is one position that would work. James's voice was reluctant. The communications tower on the east side has a clear view of the ridge, but it's completely exposed. Anyone up there would be a sitting duck. Sarah could see the communications tower through the bunker window. It was a tall metal structure with a small platform at the top, originally built for radio equipment. It would indeed provide an excellent view of the insurgent positions, but anyone climbing it would be visible to every enemy fighter on the ridge. That's a suicide mission, Captain, the colonel replied grimly. The radio fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah could see that they were running out of options. The insurgents had established a stronghold on the North Ridge with heavy weapons that could target any part of the base. Without neutralizing that position, the defenders would eventually be overwhelmed. Sir, I volunteer for the tower, came James's voice again. Negative. I need you coordinating the eastern defense. Then who? James asked what everyone was thinking. Sarah stared at the communications tower, her mind racing. She thought about the soldiers fighting for their lives outside, about Rodriguez who would never see his sister's next birthday, about the young faces that had welcomed her so warmly just days ago. She also thought about something else. 2 summers ago, her father had taken her hunting in the mountains of Pennsylvania. She had never enjoyed killing animals, but her father had insisted she learn to shoot properly. You never know when you might need to protect yourself or someone you love, he had said. She had fired her father's hunting rifle at targets up to 300 yards away, hitting them consistently. The communications tower was about 250 yards from the North Ridge, well within her demonstrated range. I'll do it, Sarah said quietly. Everyone in the bunker turned to stare at her. Colonel Martinez shook his head immediately. Ma'am, that's not even a consideration. I can shoot, Sarah insisted, her voice growing stronger. My father taught me. I know how to use a rifle. Sarah, no. James's voice came through the radio. He must have been listening to the bunker communications. Absolutely not. But Sarah was already thinking through the logistics. She was smaller and lighter than any of the soldiers, which might make her harder to spot. More importantly, she was the one person the insurgents would least expect to be holding a weapon. Listen to me, she said, addressing Colonel Martinez directly. Those men out there are dying because we can't neutralize the heavy weapons on that ridge. You said yourself that the communications tower is the only position that would work, and I also said it was suicide. Maybe for a soldier in full gear, but I'm small, quick, and the last person they'd expect. Plus, I'm the reason this attack is so intense. They want to capture an American civilian for propaganda. Let me turn that against them. The bunker fell silent except for the continuing sounds of battle outside. Colonel Martinez looked at the tactical situation, weighing an impossible decision. Every minute they delayed meant more of his soldiers could die. Sergeant Torres, despite his head wound, spoke up. "Ma'am, have you ever shot under pressure? In combat?" "No," Sarah admitted. "But I've hit moving targets at this range before. And I've got something most snipers don't have." "What's that?" "A classroom full of fifth graders who need their teacher to come home. And a husband who needs to see his next birthday." James's voice came through the radio again, desperate now. "Sarah, please, I can't lose you." "And I can't lose you either," she replied. "Or any of these soldiers." "Colonel, what rifle can you give me?" Colonel Martinez stared at her for a long moment, clearly torn between protecting a civilian and saving his men. Finally, he made the hardest command decision of his military career. "Sergeant Torres, get her the best rifle we have." Sergeant Torres returned with a military-grade sniper rifle that was heavier than anything Sarah had ever held. The weapon felt cold and alien in her hands, so different from her father's hunting rifle. But the scope and basic mechanics were similar enough that she could work with it. "This is an M24, Torres explained quickly, showing her the bolt action and scope adjustments. "It's zeroed for 300 yards. The ridge is about 250. So aim just slightly low. These are armor-piercing rounds. They'll punch through whatever cover those insurgents think they're hiding behind." Sarah nodded, trying to absorb the technical information while her hands shook with adrenaline. Through the bunker window, she could see the communications tower rising into the grey dawn sky like a steel challenge. Colonel Martinez handed her a radio headset. "We'll guide you to the targets from here. First priority is the heavy machine gun nest on the left side of the ridge. That's what's keeping our men pinned down." "How will I know which target?" "You'll know," Torres said grimly. "It's the one shooting the biggest flames." Sarah took a deep breath and looked around the bunker at the faces of the soldiers she had come to care about. These young men and women had accepted her as family, and now she had a chance to protect that family. "Sarah," James's voice crackled through the radio from his position at Tower 4. "I love you. Make every shot count." "I love you too," she replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "And I will." The journey from the bunker to the communications tower required crossing 50 yards of open ground that was intermittently swept by enemy fire. Colonel Martinez timed her movement with a coordinated suppressing fire from the remaining defensive positions. "Go! Now!" Sarah ran harder than she had ever run in her life, the heavy rifle clutched against her chest. Bullets cracked through the air around her, some so close she could feel their heat. She reached the base of the tower and began climbing the metal ladder, her legs burning with each run. The tower swayed slightly in the morning wind, and the higher she climbed, the more exposed she became. By the time she reached the small platform at the top, she was completely visible to every insurgent on the North Ridge. "I'm in position," she reported breathlessly into the radio. "Target acquired," Colonel Martinez responded immediately. "Approximately 250 yards north-northeast. You should see a concrete structure with a heavy machine gun." Sarah peered through the scope, adjusting the focus until the enemy position came into sharp detail. She could see the muzzle flashes from the machine gun that had been tearing apart the base's defenses. There were at least 3 insurgents in the position, but the gunner was her primary target. "I see him," she whispered. "Take your time," James's voice came through the headset. "Breathe slowly, squeeze gently, just like your father taught you." But as Sarah settled into a shooting position, the insurgents spotted her. Suddenly, bullets began striking the metal tower around her, sending sparks flying and creating a deadly symphony of ricochets. The platform shuddered with each impact. "They've seen me," she called out. "Take the shot," Colonel Martinez ordered. "Now." Sarah forced herself to ignore the bullets striking near her head and focused entirely on the scope. The machine gunner was clearly visible, his attention focused on targets below rather than the unexpected threat above. She regulated her breathing the way her father had taught her, waiting for the natural pause between heartbeats. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the insurgent gunner spin and fall backward. The heavy machine gun fell silent. "Target down," Torres called out from his observation position. "Outstanding shot, ma'am." But Sarah didn't have time to celebrate. Almost immediately, another insurgent moved to take over the machine gun position. She worked the bolt action and chambered another round, her movements becoming more confident with each second. The second shot was cleaner, more professional. The replacement gunner dropped before he could fire a single round. "Machine gun nest neutralized," Colonel Martinez announced over the radio. "All units advance on the eastern perimeter." With the heavy machine gun silenced, the balance of the battle shifted dramatically. The base's defenders could move more freely, and their return fire became more effective. But the insurgents had other weapons, and Sarah's position on the tower made her their primary target. "Sarah, we've got rocket-propelled grenade teams moving to target your position," James warned urgently. "You need to come down now." "Negative," Sarah replied, surprising herself at the military terminology. "I can see 2 more priority targets from here." She had spotted a mortar team that had been dropping shells into the base compound. The crew was partially hidden behind rocks, but their position was clear through her scope. The 3rd shot took out the mortar team leader. The 4th eliminated their ammunition carrier. Without coordination and fresh rounds, the mortar fire stopped completely. "Unbelievable shooting," Sergeant Torres called out. "Ma'am, you just saved a lot of lives." But the insurgents were adapting to this unexpected threat. Sarah could see fighters moving through the rocks, trying to get better angles on her tower position. She had perhaps minutes before they could coordinate enough firepower to bring the structure down. "Command, I count at least 12 more hostiles moving up the ridge," she reported, tracking targets through her scope. "They're trying to flank our eastern defense. Can you get them?" "I can get some of them." What followed was the most intense 15 minutes of Sarah's life. Shot after shot, she picked off insurgents who were threatening the base's defensive positions. Her father's training kicked in completely. Breath control, trigger squeeze, follow-through. Each round found its target. But with every shot she took, more enemy fire focused on her position. The metal platform was beginning to show serious damage from repeated impacts. Several bullets had come close enough to graze her clothing. "Sarah, the tower is taking too much damage," Colonel Martinez called urgently. "You need to evacuate your position now." She was lining up what she thought might be her final shot when she spotted something that made her blood run cold. Through the scope, she could see an insurgent with a rocket-propelled grenade launcher taking aim directly at the bunker where Colonel Martinez was coordinating the defense. "Command, RPG targeting your position. Take cover!" There was no time for the soldiers in the bunker to relocate. The insurgent was already shouldering his weapon, preparing to fire. Sarah had one chance to save the lives of everyone in the command bunker. The shot was the longest she had ever attempted, nearly 300 yards to a partially concealed target. Wind was affecting the trajectory, and her elevated position created a steep downward angle she had never practiced with. Worst of all, the insurgent was already in the process of firing his weapon. Sarah took the deepest breath of her life, let half of it out, and gently squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the RPG gunner just as he fired. His shot went wild, exploding harmlessly against the outer wall instead of penetrating the bunker. The insurgent dropped, his weapon clattering down the rocky slope. "Direct hit," James called out, his voice filled with amazement and pride. "Command bunker is secure." That shot broke the insurgents' coordinated attack. Without their heavy weapons and key leaders, their assault began to fall apart. The base's defenders pressed their counterattack, and within another 20 minutes, the remaining insurgents were retreating back into the mountains. Sarah remained on the tower until Colonel Martinez personally declared the all-clear. When she finally climbed down, her legs were shaking so badly she could barely manage the ladder. The rifle that had felt so heavy going up now seemed weightless in her hands. James was waiting for her at the bottom of the tower. He wrapped her in his arms without saying a word, both of them too emotionally exhausted for speech. Around them, the base was beginning the grim work of assessing casualties and damage. The final count showed that Sarah's actions had saved an estimated 20 lives. Her accurate shooting had eliminated the insurgents' ability to pin down the defenders, allowing them to maneuver and ultimately repel the attack. 5 soldiers had been wounded, but thanks largely to her intervention, one else had died. Later that morning, as medics treated the wounded and engineers assessed the damage, Colonel Martinez approached Sarah with a serious expression. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something important," he said. "Would you consider extending your visit?" Sarah looked at him in confusion. "I'm not sure I understand, Colonel. In 30 years of military service, I have never seen shooting like that under combat conditions. You saved this base and everyone in it. The Army could use someone with your skills." Sarah smiled and looked around at the soldiers who were cleaning weapons and repairing damage. These brave young people had become her family over the past few days, and she had discovered strength within herself that she never knew existed. "Thank you, Colonel, but I have a different kind of service to finish," she replied. "I have 35th graders back in Ohio who are counting on their teacher to come home and tell them about courage." That afternoon, as the helicopter arrived to evacuate her back to safety, Every soldier on the base turned out to salute the kindergarten teacher from Ohio who had become their guardian angel. Sarah Mitchell returned to her classroom the following week, but she carried with her the knowledge that when love meets warfare, ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. She never spoke publicly about her actions at Forward Operating Base Phoenix, but she did frame a letter from the Secretary of Defense thanking her for her service to her country. It hangs in her classroom today, next to the banner her students made for Captain Mitchell, serving as a quiet reminder that heroes come in all forms, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought by people who never expected to hold a weapon. James completed his deployment and returned home safely 3 months later. They now live quietly in Cincinnati, where Sarah continues to teach and James works as a military advisor. But on quiet evenings, when they watch the sunset together, they both remember the morning when a wife's love and a teacher's courage saved 47 lives in a place most people have never heard of, proving that heroism is not about training or preparation, but about standing up when others need you most.